Harley's own CEO confirmed what riders have feared for months. The 2026 lineup has hit the brakes. Production halts, canceled models, and a storm of new compliance laws that could make some of Harley's most iconic V-twins unsellable by next year. No marketing spin, no glossy press release, just cold reality straight from Milwaukee. This isn't about weak sales or dealer politics. This is about government red tape colliding with freedom on two wheels. Tonight, we're breaking down what really happened, what models are affected, and what this means for every rider who still believes in the sound of real steel. The CEO's confession. For over 120 years, Harley Davidson has been the living heartbeat of the American road. Its factories have weathered depressions, oil crises, and wars, but few could imagine the announcement that arrived this fall. Jochen Seitz, the man who promised to modernize Harley without losing its soul, sent a short, clinical memo to dealerships nationwide. Inside, it confirmed what most thought impossible. Several 2026 models were being delayed, and others were canceled outright. It was the kind of message riders used to associate with bankrupt startups, not with Milwaukee Steel. Dealers described the call as the quietest 10 minutes in years. Seitz spoke in his usual careful tone, explaining that the company was reevaluating model viability under new compliance conditions. Those words, new compliance conditions, landed like a hammer. There was no talk of sales charts or market shifts. This was about something deeper. For a brand built on rebellion, letting a government code dictate its lineup felt like sacrilege. Harley had weathered noise caps and tariffs, but never a law striking its core engines. Prototypes froze, audits began, and disbelief turned to dread. This wasn't marketing, it was surrender. Milwaukee's silence spoke louder than words, echoing quiet betrayal. The questions didn't end there. They were only beginning to burn. The law that broke the backbone. The statute was buried inside a multi-hundred-page environmental and safety reform package passed in early 2025. On the surface, it aimed to harmonize vehicular emissions standards across all classes. Beneath the technical phrasing lay a clause that would reshape the motorcycle landscape. All internal combustion engines must meet a newly defined composite emissions index by January of 2026, with enforcement beginning the following spring. The problem? Air-cooled V-twin engines, the very heart of Harley's identity, were designed around airflow, not catalytic trickery. Unlike liquid-cooled designs that can regulate burn temperatures precisely, these engines breathe and bleed through open metal and tradition. The new index left almost no headroom for their natural variants. Any machine exceeding the cap by even a fraction could be labeled non-compliant for continued registration. The law never banned the bikes. It buried them in paperwork. Annual emissions checks, calibration reports, and compliance fees fell on owners, not factories. Harley's plea for a 2-year grace period failed quietly. For riders who still tuned their own carburetors, it was clear. Progress had been rewritten as regulation, and freedom reduced to forms. What came next wasn't theory. It rolled straight into driveways. If you appreciate getting the real story without the corporate filter, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It helps keep this channel independent so we can keep digging into what's really happening inside the motorcycle world. And drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your take on what's going on out there. From titles to tow trucks. The first wave of panic didn't start with police sirens. It started with letters. By midsummer of 2025, several state motor vehicle departments began issuing notices stating that certain models may be subject to compliance review prior to registration renewal. Riders in Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Oregon posted photos of the letters online, sparking outrage. Some dealerships tried to calm customers, saying it was a routine update. But then came the insurance cancellations. One rider from Ohio shared his story on a forum. A 2006 Electra Glide he had maintained for nearly 2 decades was suddenly flagged as pending emissions documentation. Without it, his insurer refused renewal. Within weeks, similar cases appeared nationwide. No one's bike was physically confiscated, but the effect was the same. Ride it without papers, and you risked losing it. Independent shops tried issuing emission certificates, but auditors shut them down. Approved testing sites didn't exist, leaving owners stuck in limbo, bikes running fine yet banned by paper. "You buy it, maintain it, love it," one veteran said, "and now it's not clean enough to exist." The sting wasn't financial, it was personal. Machines once symbolizing freedom became liabilities. Titles froze, insurance lapsed, and family heirlooms turned into garage relics, steel ghosts of independence, silenced by bureaucracy instead of the open road. Inside Milwaukee, reality hit harder than any torque curve could. They can regulate the bikes, but they can't regulate pride. Check the description for the gear that keeps that spirit alive. The meeting behind locked doors. The call came on a humid Wednesday morning. Executives, legal advisors, and engineers filed into the conference room on the 4th floor of Juneau Avenue, the company's historic nerve center. Behind closed doors, Yochin sites faced a wall of projection screens filled with compliance charts, cost estimates, and red deadlines. Every department was bleeding time and money. The engineering team insisted that the new mandates were unworkable for their current platforms. Retooling the Milwaukee 8 engines could take years and cost hundreds of millions. The finance division countered that non-compliance fines could bankrupt them faster. The debate wasn't about performance, it was about survival. Someone reportedly muttered, "We're trying to engineer freedom on a stopwatch." By midday, Harley suspended all 2026 launches, shifting focus to certification redesigns. Dealers got confidential memos to halt ads and pre-orders. Veterans urged a public fight, but lawyers warned silence. No press release came, only confirmation that Harley, born of rebellion, now stood still. The news spread fast. Riders felt abandoned, not by machines, but by a system rewriting the road. For the first time, defiance had no throttle, and the open highway felt eerily quiet. Far from those boardrooms, the fight was shifting onto asphalt. Dealer orders frozen. The warning didn't come through news headlines. It came through a glitch. Late one evening, dealers across the Midwest logged into the company's internal ordering portal to check their spring allocations. Instead of the usual list of models and colors, a red banner flashed across the top. "Hold, pending compliance review." Beneath it, every 2026 unit showed a gray status bar marked "locked." At first, many thought it was a system bug, but when screenshots began circulating in private dealer chats, it became clear that this wasn't a mistake, it was a full stop. Veteran shop managers said it felt like deja vu. They remembered the old twin-cam recall days when Harley quietly pulled parts from circulation until engineers could verify fixes. But this time, the freeze wasn't about oil leaks or crank bearings, it was about the law itself. Dealers who called corporate got the same scripted response. Models are under temporary review for federal compliance certification. That was all. No timeline, no specifics, just bureaucratic fog. Confusion turned to dread. Mechanics did the math. Temporary review meant slow lines, thin paychecks, and refunds piling up. Posters came down, demo rides canceled, and phones stopped ringing. Even veteran reps went silent. Shipments froze, parts ran dry, and shops began stripping unsold bikes for service. The hum of Milwaukee pride faded into the sound of loose bolts in the frame. Everyone felt it, something bigger than sales, heavier than rumor, tightening like a wrench on the whole company. Each halted shipment carried a whisper of something far worse coming. The deadline clause. Nobody mentioned. Most riders never saw the law coming. It wasn't announced with headlines or public hearings. It was slipped into Section 421 of a 1,000-page environmental reform bill. Buried halfway through the text was the clause that started it all. All motorcycles sold after January of 2026 must achieve full compliance with the Composite Emissions Index, and all existing models must be recertified by January of 2028. Enforcement, it said, would begin 1 year prior, January of 2027. That meant Harley had less than 2 years to redesign engines that took decades to perfect. Engineers inside the company were stunned. The Milwaukee 8 platform, launched with pride only a few years earlier, would need extensive changes to survive. The twin-cooled versions might squeeze under the line, but the pure air-cooled power plants, Harley's signature heartbeat, had no chance without massive retooling. The law didn't ban old engines. It just barred them from renewal if they failed new standards. Riders panicked, unsure if their road kings or fat boys would stay legal. Corporate had no answers. Harley's lawyers hunted loopholes, but every path hit a wall. Fines loomed at $10,000 per bike. Engineers raced against the clock, buried in tests and paperwork. What began as regulation became something deeper, a countdown threatening not just production, but the soul that powered Harley's legacy. When riders saw the fine print, faith began to crack. The cost of staying legal. No one needed a calculator to know it would hurt. But when the first internal cost breakdown leaked, jaws dropped across the industry. Just to bring the Milwaukee 8 engines into partial compliance, Harley would need to redesign the catalytic system, upgrade the ECU architecture, and build new testing facilities to simulate long-term emission cycles. Each step had a price tag, and together they painted a grim picture. An early estimate from a confidential report placed total redesign costs between $400 and $500 million over 2 years. That kind of outlay would have been survivable in Harley's boom days, but not in a market already shrinking. Spread across the lineup, it meant an average of $5,000 added to every motorcycle before chrome, before freight, before profit. Dealers saw it instantly. A base street glide could top $30,000, while entry models slipped beyond reach. If Harley ate the cost, profits died. If it passed it on, buyers disappeared. Suppliers felt it next. Orders cut, projects shelved, engineers chasing compliance instead of horsepower. Heritage met arithmetic, and math won. Analysts later called it regulatory compression. Writers called it something simpler. The moment the open road met red tape, and the soul of Harley hit a bureaucratic wall. Across the nation, calculators clicked louder than idling engines tonight. The wallet shockwave. By late autumn of 2025, the ripple reached the streets. Used bike values started tumbling. Pre-owned Harleys that once commanded premium prices began selling for a fraction of their worth. Buyers were hesitant. No one wanted to gamble on a machine that might become unregisterable within a year. Dealers sat on unsold inventory, watching interest rates climb and loan approvals dry up. Financing companies grew nervous. Some banks stopped offering long-term motorcycle loans altogether, citing market volatility. Others quietly raised minimum credit thresholds, effectively shutting out younger customers. It was a slow-motion freeze that spread through every corner of the community. Trade-ins collapsed. Dealers offered half the usual value, and private sales froze over missing compliance papers. Bikes that once defined pride now carried question marks. Some riders hid theirs off-grid. Others searched forums for loopholes and exemptions. It wasn't rebellion. It was survival. Beneath the numbers, frustration turned personal. They felt punished for keeping tradition alive. As Harley scrambled for stability, the culture that built it stiffened into quiet resistance, a brotherhood refusing to let bureaucracy erase the open road. What followed wasn't surrender. It was the spark of defiance. Dealers caught in the middle. Across the Midwest, dealership showrooms felt different that winter. The neon lights still glowed and the smell of oil still hung in the air, but the rhythm had changed. In Kansas City, a dealer named Ron had spent 30 years selling Harleys. He remembered the booms, the recalls, the bad years, and the comebacks, but he had never seen anything like this. Corporate told him not to move the 2026 units. The government told him not to sell the old ones. And his customers, the same men who once filled the parking lot every Saturday, were now calling daily just to ask one question: what happens to my bike next year? In Texas, a family-owned dealership faced the same nightmare. Their father had opened the shop back in 1979, welding pipes by hand before Harley even offered custom kits. Now his sons were stuck explaining federal clauses to riders who just wanted to buy a touring model and get back on the road. The older brother leaned across the counter and told one customer the truth. "They're treating us like we're selling contraband." He wasn't exaggerating. The paperwork for every shipment had doubled, the audits had tripled, and the morale had sunk. In Georgia, a dealer called it watching history boxed up. Rows of silent bikes waited for clearance that might never come. Still, mechanics clocked in, polishing chrome out of habit and hope. Loyalty kept those shops alive through recessions, but now it was tested harder than ever. Dealers who'd stood by the brand for decades felt abandoned. They'd done everything right, yet found themselves punished for faith, left waiting while the company they upheld forgot how to fight. From back rooms to blacktop, loyalty was about to get loud. The riders mobilize. It started the same way every modern rebellion does, with a few angry posts on message boards. By the first week of February 2025, forums filled with riders sharing letters from DMVS, canceled insurance notices, and dealer screenshots. Then came the idea that would change everything: a national rally to demand rider rights. The plan was simple: meet at regional checkpoints, ride under one flag, and show the country what real motorcyclists still stood for. In Minnesota, a retired trucker organized the first meetup outside a Harley dealership that had closed 2 weeks earlier. 50 riders showed up, then 100. The next week, 200 rolled in from neighboring states. Local news cameras captured the sight of V-twins idling in unison, chrome flashing under a cold gray sky. One anchor called it the quietest protest you can hear from miles away. Footage spread fast, and rallies erupted across Florida, Arizona, Ohio, and Washington. It wasn't just Harley riders. Indian, Goldwing, and Triumph owners joined in unity. Petitions poured in, tens of thousands demanding protection for older bikes. Lawmakers couldn't ignore it. Parking lots turned into campgrounds, filled with stories, laughter, and engines idling like heartbeats. When each rally ended, one collective rev thundered across the horizon. A single defiant sound that said, "Freedom still lives on two wheels." But while the riders found their voice, inside Harley's walls, a different kind of battle was raging. A fight not over loyalty, but over survival. If you want to stay ahead of what's coming next for Harley and every major brand on the road, hit that subscribe button. We're tracking every change that matters to real riders, not headlines built for clicks. Milwaukee's Civil War. Inside the headquarters on Juneau Avenue, tension was reaching a breaking point. The engineering teams, many made up of lifelong riders themselves, were pushing for a solution that would save the sound, the soul, and the tradition. They argued that the air-cooled V-twin could be modified just enough to meet the standard if given time. They pleaded for an extension, a technical variance, anything to keep the engines alive. The finance division saw things differently. Their spreadsheets told a brutal truth. Redesigning those motors without guaranteed compliance could bankrupt the company faster than fines ever would. They wanted full focus on new modular engines that could be certified quickly. The engineers called that surrender. The executives called it strategy. Meetings turned bitter. Engineers fought for soul. Executives fought for survival. "You can't calculate heritage," one said. "You can't pay bills with nostalgia," came the reply. Rumors spread of secret prototype engines, bridges between past and policy. Some believed Harley would rebrand them. Others feared quiet extinction. Inside Milwaukee, rebellion had turned inward. The company that once defied the world was now battling its own identity, caught between profit and pride, progress and the sound that defined generations. But outside those walls, riders had no interest in internal politics. They were too busy proving that the Harley spirit didn't need permission to exist. The Freedom Ride of 25 minutes. On a warm April morning in 2025, the rebellion reached its crescendo. Thousands of riders rolled out from small towns across America, merging into one unstoppable wave of chrome and thunder. They called it the Freedom Ride, a coast-to-coast demonstration of unity, not rage. It wasn't organized by a party or a corporation. It was organized by the road itself. Highways filled with two-wheel caravans stretching for miles. From the deserts of Nevada to the hills of Tennessee, the same sound echoed, the steady rhythm of V-twins running proud. Overpasses filled with waving families. Truckers honked in solidarity. News helicopters followed the procession, their footage showing ribbons of motorcycles cutting across the landscape like veins of molten steel. There were no speeches, no banners, only riders moving as one. Leather, denim, chrome, and silence. They rode to remind the nation that motorcycles weren't rebellion, they were identity. At the Capitol, helmets lifted, flags waved, and engines cooled beneath fading light. It wasn't protest, it was remembrance. That night, headlights shimmered across the memorial walls, echoing a truth no law could silence. Freedom still had a sound, and it rolled steady on two wheels into the American dusk. That day, the road spoke louder than the boardroom. But when the roar faded and the engines cooled, the question that remained was simple. What happens next when freedom itself becomes a line item on a budget sheet? Competitors and copycats. When the smoke settled from the protests and policy debates, the industry did what industries always do. It adapted. But not everyone adapted the same way. Indian, Honda, and Yamaha each saw the same legislative storm coming and moved faster than anyone in Milwaukee expected. Indian leaned hard on its new modular power plants, quietly adjusting head temperatures and exhaust pathways to slip under the emissions threshold without changing the sound riders loved. Engineers at Spirit Lake called it refinement without surrender, and to their credit, it worked. Honda took a different route. Precision was always their religion, and when the new rules dropped, they didn't blink. Their touring engines already ran clean enough to pass future regulations, needing only minor recalibration. They didn't brag about it, didn't market it, they just delivered. For Honda, the new compliance era wasn't a threat, it was a business advantage. The same quiet reliability that once earned their reputation was now their shield. Yamaha treated the crisis as engineering, not politics, refining catalytic cores until riders felt no loss. Triumph, Moto Guzzi, and BMW adapted too, keeping heritage alive while staying compliant. But Harley faced the Milwaukee paradox, a legacy so powerful it trapped itself. Change the V-twin and betray tradition, keep it and face extinction. Competitors evolved, but Harley stood locked between memory and mandate, proof that even legends can be outpaced by their own unbreakable identity. And while competitors pressed forward, the people who built those bikes, the men and women who kept the factories alive, were left to face a quieter kind of reckoning, one shift at a time. The workers behind the steel. The workers in Menomonee Falls and York had seen plenty of slowdowns before, but this one felt heavier. When the orders froze and the compliance delays hit, the assembly lines started shrinking. A few hundred layoffs came first, then more through temporary reassignments. Management called it restructuring, but on the floor, everyone knew what it really meant, another winter of uncertainty. Inside the plant, welders who had been there since the shovelhead era now found themselves training on maintenance instead of fabrication. One welder named Jeff, who had worked 28 years for Harley, said it best. Every bike we built was a promise with fingerprints on it. Now they want to build paperwork instead. There was no anger left, only pride tempered by truth. Those factories weren't just workplaces. They were part of America's rhythm, where steel met sweat and freedom took shape on two wheels. Even as layoffs came, the workers kept showing up, tools in hand, duty intact. In break rooms, talk turned from overtime to legacy, from paychecks to purpose. They didn't ask for sympathy, only the chance to keep building something real, something born of their hands and forged in pride. But as factories fought to stay alive, the marketplace outside was changing faster than anyone inside those walls could keep up with. The market reckoning. By mid-year, the numbers started telling their own story. Harley's stock price slipped to its lowest point in 15 years. Supplier networks tightened, and several small parts manufacturers went dark. For the first time since the 80s, dealerships began closing faster than they opened. In small towns across America, showroom lights went out for good, leaving behind empty buildings and fading logos. The cause and effect was brutally clear. Legislation drove compliance costs. Compliance costs drove price increases. Price increases drove customers away. And when customers left, the whole chain collapsed. It wasn't greed or mismanagement. It was gravity, the kind that no marketing campaign could defy. By 2027, analysts predicted recovery, but hope came slower. Dealers closed, trade-ins crashed, and even used bikes gathered dust. Those showrooms weren't just businesses. They were gathering grounds where riders shared road tales and coffee before dawn. Suppliers lost orders, craftsmen lost purpose, and towns lost heartbeat. Harley's heritage, once a lifeline, had turned fragile. When one gear stopped turning, the whole machine faltered, and the spirit that built it began to slip through oil-stained hands. Yet, even in that downturn, even as the markets crumbled and factories slowed, something deeper remained, a question that no law or stock ticker could answer. The meaning of the machine. When the noise faded and the headlines cooled, what remained was reflection. Across garages and quiet highways, riders sat beside their bikes in silence, listening to the tick of cooling engines. They weren't thinking about stock prices or compliance charts. They were thinking about what those machines had meant for decades, for generations. To many, a Harley had never been just a tool of transport. It was a companion through life, a witness to moments both grand and ordinary. It carried fathers to work, sons to war memorials, and friends to funerals. It symbolized everything that was untamed and individual. That spirit couldn't be printed in legislation or contained in a federal registry. The government can measure exhausts and cap emissions, but it can't regulate pride. The horizon still calls to those who roll out at dawn, throttle steady and heart wide open. Laws may tighten, factories may fade, but every rider who rebuilds keeps the legend alive. Freedom isn't granted by policy, it's earned, mile by mile. The spirit of Harley endures, welded into steel and carried by those who refuse to let the road go silent. The echo of the V-twin fades, but its rhythm remains. The heartbeat of a nation that still believes freedom is worth the fight. So here's the truth. Harley's fighting a storm it didn't see coming, and every rider who still loves that old-school heartbeat is caught in the middle. The question now isn't if Harley will change, it's what gets left behind when it does. If this breakdown hit home, give the video a like and hit subscribe so you're here when we cover what Harley does next and how it affects your bike in the garage. See you on the next ride. But before you go, where do you think Harley's headed from here? Drop your take in the comments. I'm curious where the community stands.